Welcome back, sewists. Spring is in the air and I am in the mood for summery fun sews. I have had this pattern. It is New Look, let me see, 6292. I've had it in my to be sewn pile for quite a while. I actually pulled it out. I have already got the pattern cut out to the size. I've made one in a size, a different size, a 16, which I think might have been for my mom. Though I got the pattern put together, but I don't think I've ever actually sewn it. We're gonna do some pattern alteration. However, I've done some measuring. It's very straight. It's very much a column, and I am not. I'm very full in the hip. So I'm gonna show you a very simple alteration to do today to give you some fullness in the hip, especially in the back, which is where I need it. You can do this though in the front or the back, this little alteration that I'm going to show you. I'm going to sew it up in this lovely green. Now, this is not a color I wear a lot. You can see this is how it's going to look on me. I tend to go with more jewel tones. If you are from the era that I am, when they used to do spring, summer, autumn, you know, that whole thing. I was always the debate whether I was a summer or a winter. I wear both colors a lot. This is not in either one. I think this would be a spring or an autumn color, but I'm gonna wear it. I love it though. It's so summery and happy and cheerful looking. So this is my fabric. If you watched last week, I did a pattern review of a bunch of indie pattern companies, and thank you guys. I have had so many new suggestions. I've just been writing down pattern companies and looking up everything everyone recommends or says that they just sewed. It's so fun to see what you're working on. Definitely be revisiting another pattern, another video like that where I show off some indie companies. Fit of the day, you may recognize this fabric. This was also at the end of last week when I showed my sale fabric from Hobby Lobby. I literally just sat down right after that video and sewed this up in about 30 minutes. It's my favorite raglan t-shirt. I think this is the 7th or 8th time I've sewn it up. I can make it now in 30 minutes. I've sewn it so much I don't even have to think. It just zoop. Somehow it just comes together on its own under the serger. Anyway, tangent. Let's get going on the pattern making and making this super cute top. Let's start with the pattern alteration that I'm going to do. More attractive for my body, and it's one of the things about making your own patterns. I'm working on some pattern making videos for you too. Let's get this one done. All right, this is the back of my pattern, and I have measured, and this hip line is just too tight, like it would not even come down over my hip. I'm sewing up the 22. I'm a little worried it's gonna be too big in the top. It's a pretty fitted pattern. It's meant for knits. It slides over the head. However, I wanna make sure I don't have a problem. I'm broad-shouldered, broad-hipped, that I don't have an issue getting it over my shoulders or my hips. So I'm kind of going up. I can always alter back down if I need to. We're going to do the slash and spread method. So we swing this open. Will be hinged up here in the neckline. Now you can do this alteration in a shoulder or a neckline very easily. I've measured down my seam allowance. This neckline has 3/8 inch here. It's at a 5/8 inch in the shoulder. I've chosen to do the neckline just because I don't want to change the shoulder in this case. If I were doing this in the front, I probably would do the same thing, do it in the neckline instead of the shoulder. There's lots of places you can do it depending on where you need the ease. So in the back, I'm just measuring over about 1.5 inches. I'm going straight down. I'm making sure I keep this really straight. All I'm trying to do is keep it in this little neckline, kind of on the straighter end of it. Keep this nice and straight, and I'm going straight down, parallel line to that center back line. And I'm going to make a line that we're going to slash and spread on. Here, where my seam allowance and my new line meet, I'm going to put a piece of tape, and I want to just really cover this junction to make it a little stronger. And then we are going to cut from hem all the way up to the seam allowance line, but not through it. So we're going to have a hinge. If you've done pattern making with me before, hinging is important. I just set down my scissors. Okay, now this is in the back for me. You can do this in the front. Let's say you're really full in the front and straight in the back. This can be done either place. Just make sure you're not crossing any darts or anything. Okay, so I'm up here, I'm cutting up to, so you can see there's my little area. Now I'm going to come from the other side. I'm making a true hinge, and I'm going to cut to that line, but I'm leaving a little piece of tissue, and which is also why I put the tape on it, so you can see now it will move. Okay, so we've got this prepped. Now we're going to get our paper we're going to tape it down to. And now I can swing this out, and you can see how much I can add to that hip line. And let's say I need to add 6 inches to the back. If I add 3 inches here, that gives me 6 inches total. You can see how easily you can add quite a bit and make this pretty full. But notice up here at the top, we're adding very little in the shoulder, very little in the waist. It just, it's just a wedge, so it adds more as it goes down. Perfect for adding to the hip and hemline. I'm going to tape this down along the back here to make it stable. And I'm going to hinge out with my skinny piece that I cut off. Would you be interested? Leave a comment below. I've been thinking about doing a video specific to plus size and how your fit affects how it looks. So the better the pattern fits, the better it fits in the shoulder, etc., the more flattering it is on our bodies. Okay, here's my hip line. This is where I want to make sure I add it. So here's the 3 inch. I'm going to add 3 inches, which is 6 inches total. You can see how full that is. And what I'm doing is I'm not adding that to the hem, because the hem is long. I'm adding it up a little higher. I want to make sure that I add it in the place that I need it so I get enough fullness. Okay, I'm going to start taping down. Now you can draw this line in there too. You could easily draw your line in. Don't want to get that crooked. There we go. Make sure that that doesn't move on me. Your pattern, this is called flat pattern design, and your pattern should still be flat. You should have no lumps, humps, bumps in your pattern. It should lay flat on the table. All right, so now that I've added that, you can see how full that is. I'm just going to even out my hem here. So I'm going to just match this back up. I'm going to darken that line so I know which line to cut on. And that is my back altered. I've added what I need to for the back. It's ready to go. And I'm just going to double check that that's enough of my hip line. So there you can see how much I've added in the back only, and it'll be nice and full now, and it'll hang the way I need it to. Be careful if you tape that you do not iron over the tape when you're pressing your patterns. Tape will melt. Alright, so there is my perfect pattern piece ready to go. Here is my front. You could do the exact same thing in the front. With the front, if you needed to add fullness, if you have a bit of a tummy, this really is fullness for the tummy, not for the bust line. If you were the whole bust line alteration there's a lot more to it, but you could easily do the same thing. Measure down your 3/8 inch, which is what the seam allowance is for this neckline. Make your mark, draw down, and spread it open and add for your tummy to give you a little extra fullness in the front. That's definitely an option. And you can see, just look at how straight this is. There is no curve in this shape at all. So if you are fuller in the bust and you cut this out for your bust line, it will hang nice if you're a narrower hipped person. If you're a full hipped person, you're going to need to do some alteration. You can also, of course, come along and draw out your side seam. That's another option. It would change the way the sizing is. I'm going to tell you one more thing about this. When you're cutting out your neckline facings, there's two front facing pieces. And the way they have done this is they have done the sizing every other size. So this one has a 10, 14, 18, 22. This one has a 12, 16, 20 on it. So just check for your sizing and cut the facing that you need for your size. There is a little tiny bias cut neck facing. This is for that goes from your front facing all the way around the rest of the neck. And then you have a long sleeve. I don't want a long sleeve, so I have folded up my sleeve. like this and made a short sleeve. I have 2.5 yards of 45-inch wide fabric, which should be enough to get this out, and we're ready to cut. Laying out, normally they have it so that you will, if you're laying on a fold like this, your pattern pieces will meet at the hem or at the neckline. In other words, the folds will face you both times, so you will have like the neckline of my back is up here and the neckline of my front is over here. That's fine if your pattern is not directional, but if I were sewing something that had all of the flowers facing one way, or horses or something, you could end up with your horses upside down. So if that's the case, just flip. If it's a symmetrical pattern, you can just flip it and look at the wrong side to cut your pattern piece, the wrong side of the paper pattern, and that way you keep your directional design of the fabric all going the same direction. So mine is not directional, it does not matter, but if you do have that, you may be able to flip your pattern piece. More to it if you have directional fabric, so just think about that when choosing your design of your fabric, if it's going to be directional or not. You can see I folded over here, so as I roll, I just slowly roll my fabric up. This pattern does have the option for doing a breast pocket, which I will not be doing. But it's certainly there if you want to do it. It has little markings where to put your pocket. So now that we have these done, I have a sleeve left. Oh, it just fits. Woot, I can get my sleeve in here. And then I just need one neckline facing. So that can easily fit in this piece over here. I'm going to do it at the top, not in the middle like that. But I can get my neckline facing. I have to cut one of these at interfacing. And then the other piece that's left is this. It is a bias piece, so you have to lay it where you can get it across, and you need one bias piece to finish off your neckline. Go ahead and cut, and then I'll meet you over to sew. Up here at the very top where I started, that I can easily get the bias piece and the facing piece out of. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those, and then don't forget to cut an interfacing piece for your facing also. We're all cut out, including interfacing. So the first thing we're going to do is pattern prep. And for me, that is fuse anything that needs fused, transfer all the markings, put in the darts. I do all of those things first instead of waiting till I come to the step in the pattern. I just like to, to me, it is the preliminary stuff. Once that's done, then I can just put the whole garment together. I'm going to start actually with my facing. I took my interfacing piece, laid it over the pattern, and transferred the lines for cutting open onto the right side of the interfacing. I'm going to do my little interfacing trick. You may have seen this before, where I use the interfacing to finish the seam edge instead of serging it or folding under. To me, when you have a lightweight semi-sheer fabric, which is what this is, This is my favorite way to finish a facing because it does not leave an edge that's real noticeable. If you serge it, if you do anything else, it tends to demarcate and stand out a little bit behind the sheer fabric. So this is my favorite way of doing it. So I'm going to just sew around right sides together 3/8 of an inch, facing to interfacing, around my straight edges and not my neckline edge. Right sides together. So when I go to turn this, I will be turning it through that neckline edge. Now, if you don't want to do this, you could totally fuse on your interfacing and then just serge around that edge, or press back those and top stitch it down. Flip this around. So now its edges are finished. I'm going to carefully line it up and now press it, and then it will also be fused. So here it is. My facing's finished but not fused. It's ready to be fused, so that's ready to go. I'm going to head over to the ironing board for that. And let's go ahead and put in our dart. Now this is where the pattern starts. It has you put in your dart first, and then if you're going to do the breast pockets, it has you do the breast pockets next. Always put on a top pocket like that, like a breast pocket or patch pocket. Before the whole garment's sewn together, it just makes your life so much easier. Oh, before I take this off completely, I need to transfer my marking for the side slit. I'm gonna go ahead and mark my dart point. I swear, this is marked like I have sewn it, and I have zero memory of it. Isn't that weird? It's not hanging in my closet. It's in my size. Like, it's been clipped and everything. I wonder where it is. I have zero memory of doing this. It's very odd in my brain. My brain's having a hard time with that. It's definitely been cut out before. I'll have to search the pattern number, see if I have a video already of this, because I do not remember. Okay, so when I was upstairs working, I kept saying, I've made this pattern before. I've obviously cut it out. It has clip marks. You can see where I poked through for the dart, like all the things. And I have zero memory of it. And I also was like, what fabric? It's not hanging in my closet. Who did I make this for? So I'm done making this project. I'm downstairs getting ready to upload the footage, and I went back to my YouTube channel and I put in new look because it's a new look pattern, and it popped up. So I did make this a long time ago for my mom. I say a long time ago, not that long ago. My sewing room was done. So in the last 2 years, I have made this pattern. We're making it again. We're revisiting it. I have zero memory of it. I mean, I remember making this for my mom. I do not remember it being this pattern. I put a zipper in the neckline for my mom. So today we are making it very much according to the directions without the zipper. So if you want to see the zipper version, I'm going to put it below. It's made out of a stunning fabric that my sister designed. Otherwise, today we're revisiting this pattern. It's funny how it was completely wiped from my brain. It's like when I read, I devour a book. I can't even tell you the title of it, but I can tell you all the characters and, you know, all the backstory on all of them. But what was the title? I'm not real sure, and I forgot who did it. I don't know why. That's what happened with this pattern, though. We're ready to put in our dart. If you've never done a dart before, I do have a dart video. I'll have it linked in the description. It is just a standalone video of doing a dart. When you're putting in darts, almost always there's some bias in that dart, so you have to be careful not to stretch your fabric too much and distort the dart. If you struggle with your darts, go ahead and draw the dart legs and everything on there, and then you can stitch right on that line. You can see the little tail sticking out, and it fits perfectly when pressed down. It's not a super deep dart. When I did that shirt for my sister, the satin shirts, they have really deep darts, which is great if you're very busty. So I'm gonna go ahead and press everything, and then we will come back to, so we have done step 1. We are not doing, I'm personally not doing the pocket, so we're skipping the pocket thing. Go ahead and do the stay stitching. I'm gonna go ahead and do that while I'm sitting here. That's for the neckline, and because we have the neckline opening and all that, I'm gonna go ahead and stay stitch this neckline, and all that is going around the neck to keep it from stretching out. So I'm just gonna stitch like at 1/4 of an inch around it. It doesn't really matter. It's just temporary to keep you from stretching out that neckline. You have soft fabric like I do. It may want to gather on you, which is not helpful, which is what mine is doing. If that happens, shorten your stitch. This is just to protect that shape. Where I first started, I had lengthened my stitch and it definitely gathered it. So I've stay stitched that neckline. We need to do the same in the back. And we're gonna go ahead and press that real quick, and then I'll meet you back over here. I'm looking to see, it looks like it has us do the shoulder seams. I'm not going to 100% follow the directions. I'm going to put in that front placket flat before I do the shoulder seam. It is much easier to work with if you don't have that whole back on there and you're working in a hole. I'm just going to do the front placket part first, that front opening. We do not need a shoulder seam to get that on. Then we could do the shoulder seam and finish the neckline. So we're definitely not sewing in the order of the pattern. It's in my head makes more sense, and it will also make it a little less complicated when at the sewing machine. So let's press, and I'll meet you back here. Here's a quick close-up of that facing. You can see how soft that is. It's very flat. I'm now going to come in and I'm just going to top stitch all the way around this, and that just keeps everything flat, keeps it from separating later, and then we'll be ready to put in the facing. And you can see my little lines. They're very faint, but they're on there for stitching here in a minute. All right, my facing is all made, ready to go. I have right sides together. You can see all my lines are drawn. And what I'm making sure to do is when I pin this facing on, I get it perfectly centered in this neckline. We do not want to have this go off at an angle or be askew. So I've got my center front marked here. I make sure everything lines up perfectly on my center front, that it's equidistant from each side. We do not want this placket to get shifted. Once I get it nice and centered, then I can pin everything on, and then we're ready to stitch. I'm going to come up close. We're going to stitch on these outer lines. Now, if you hold this up to yourself and you're like, that's too low, I'm not putting in the little button loops. I personally just want to leave it simple. But if you're like, I want to wear this without a shirt under it, but it's too low for me, you can easily redraw this line and shorten how far this placket opens. That's it. It's an easy alteration to make. So if you know for sure you don't want it to open quite as far as it does, just shorten the placket opening. So we're going to come and redraw our lines to how far we need to open. You do want it to open because we have to pull this over our head, and it has to open at least a little bit. You have to have some sort of opening in this placket, but it could be short. If you have just a couple of inches, it will be open enough to get this over your head. The more it opens, the easier it is, but that's it. So we're ready to now stitch. Okay, can you see my redrawn lines? I have shortened it just about 3/4 of an inch, not just a little bit. I just want to have it high enough that it's easy to wear, and or low enough that it's easy to wear, and high enough that I don't have a lot of cleavage. That's it. We're now going to line up on our first line here. Now you do want a pretty short stitch length when you're doing something like this, because we're going to be turning and opening this, and we do not want to have issues with our fabric. Out of the way. Because I have drawn my lines, I can go straight down. Have the garment on the bottom, the placket on top. Gives nice stability, because we have two layers that are very different. Sink in that point and turn. We're going to come right back up. Okay, now that I've done the main V, I'm going to come back and we're going to come back and get this neckline shape. 3/8 of an inch right here, make sure everything's lined up. And we're sewing up to where we had stopped, and we're actually going to turn the corner. You can see where all my back stitching is here. I actually went in and reinforced that back stitching because I just do not want to have any issues right here in this corner. So I'm coming up. Now you could do this all in one for sure. Sink my needle. And now we can turn that corner. So if you wanted to sew this all in one, this is how you would do it. But I'm not going to. I'm just trying to get that to meet up nice and pretty so we can cut it open. We're going to now do this side. Doing it all in one probably is best. I didn't. Let's see where my 3/8 is. Here's our placket on. So this is, you're looking at the right side of the garment currently because I have not cut this open. I'm going to wait to do all of that. We're now going to do our shoulder seams. I am sewing out of order. I think it's so much easier to sew this placket when there's no back attached to the shoulder seams. So I can lay it nice and flat and do the work. Now we can come do shoulder seams. Our options for seams are many. We know we need to be able to press open our side seam because we have a side slit, we have a high-low hem, we need to do a special or a different type of hemming along the side slit, etc. So we have to press open that seam. I'm going to just serge those seams and press them open for the side seam. For the shoulder, I was like, I could French seam or a mock French seam, something like that. I think I'm going to just serge. So what I'm going to do, okay, so first I'm going to take a scrap. And I'm going to serge it, I'm going to press it, and I'm going to see how that looks through because I really do not want to see it shadowing. Okay, so I've pressed it and it's not bad. I'm going to just serge my seam allowances. I think that's the most straightforward way. So I'm going to go to the serger real quick, and on all of these straight edges, so both shoulders and both side seams, I'm just going to serge that edge, not taking anything off. I'm being careful not to roll it. Make sure your dart is pressed down towards the hem, not up towards the armhole. Now I'm not going to pull through, I'm not pulling through when I'm serging, but I am putting pressure on it so that it doesn't, I don't have waffling or rolling of my seam. Okay, so that's just how it's going to look finished. All right, so here's my front with the seam allowance done. Now I'm going to do the seam edge, my seam finish, and now I'm going to do the same thing here with the back. Oh, this is so soft and drapey. I'm not worrying about the hems for now. We'll come back and worry about that in a minute. Something I didn't say in the beginning is that I did pre-treat my fabric. I serged the edges of my piece that I bought, and I washed and dried it just like it's going to be treated once it's a finished garment. It is polyester, so it washes and dries fine, and I wasn't really worried about shrinkage, but I did go ahead and give it a wash. Now that we have got all of our seam allowances finished, we're just going to come in and sew together at our shoulder seam, and it's 5/8 of an inch. I'm going to go ahead and cut this open before I do it because, again, I don't have the back in the way. So we're going to cut open our facing, and we're going to cut right down that center line, up to but not through at the point. Here's where you have to be very careful, and if you stitch too close together, you may have a problem. If you did stitch too closely, you can always come in and re-stitch right around here. What you don't want to do is clip your stitches. Now this is ready. Once we're done, we can trim and flip around, and that will be our right side. 5/8 of an inch, just straight stitching, right sides together. forget to backstitch. When you're backstitching, 2 to 3 stitches is all you need. You just need enough to lock in those stitches. You don't need to backstitch your whole seam. When I was teaching my kiddos, not my own children, but when I was teaching kiddos sewing, junior high and high schoolers, I don't know why, but I always had a student in every class who thought you had to backstitch a ton. Okay, I'm just going to press these seams open and then we'll be ready to apply our neckline bias. Okay, we're going to take our little bias piece, we're going to fold it in half, wrong sides together so we see the right side, and we're going to pin that around the neckline. Now there's little markings on the pattern piece and on the neckline to line up with to help you keep it straight. And I've already got the center back marked and pinned on. You do not want to stretch your neckline because this is bias. It will shape very easily. Start in the center back or on one of those little marking pieces. You can use clips instead of pins if it helps. And we're going to just go across. Here's our seam allowance. We're going to go all the way across and into our facing. I'm going to pin our seam allowance open so I don't have to worry about them flipping under my machine when I'm stitching. And this will get sewn on the 3/8 inch line. If it's easier, use clips. Depends on your fabric. I'm sure this fabric is so lightweight that pins are better. So it's going to be like that. Okay, I've done half. I'll go ahead and do the other half and we'll be ready to go. Okay, we're ready to sew at the 3/8 inch line. We're pinned on. I'm starting in my old stitching of the facing. I have the shirt down and the bias up. Making sure my seam allowance doesn't flip, which is why I have so many pins right here. So let's take this little corner here and we're going to trim it out so we have a nice sharp edge of our neckline. Now you want to not get your stitching, you're only getting the fabric, so that when this is flipped, we'll have a nice corner. Okay, now let's do our understitching. All right, I have taken and pressed all of the facing, seam allowance and everything all towards the cut edge like this. And I'm going to edge stitch right along here. And then this whole thing's going to get flipped to the inside and we're going to top stitch it down along this bottom edge. And that's going to finish it off. So I'm going to start right here. You can see here's my facing. Now this stitching will be on the inside. It's not going to be seen from the outside. Because we're working with bias, you want to make sure you don't get any rolling or pleating. It's just trying to happen right there. trim off these excess threads, they can get caught down in the machine from underneath, and you won't know it till your machine jams up. Alright, so now that that is stitched, we're going to now turn all of this to the inside, and we're going to pin it and top stitch that down. Okay, now that we've done our understitching, we're going to flip the facing through, trimmed out our little corners. So this is the inside, here's my facing, and I'm going to press this, and I'm going to pin down all of that little bias to the inside so we will not see it at all poking through. I'm going to give this a nice press. And if you have to, you may have to do a little clipping along the neckline in just a few spots, not in the bias itself, most likely just on the shirt collar or the shirt edge neckline. May need a little clipping here and there. We'll be ready to top stitch this in. So I'm going to press and pin and meet you back here for some top stitching. And I would give this a nice press too. You do not want this bias piece peeking out to the right side, so we're going to pin it to make sure that from the right side we don't see it. And I am going to give this a good pressing. So you can see the opening and how it's going to look. All right, I'm going to sit and fiddle with this for a minute. Okay, I'm pressing all of that to the wrong side. This is the right side of my shirt. So here's my facing and my bias. Now let's talk about this little area right here. If you turn and press and it looks like that, you get this weird pinchy thing. All that means is that you need to clip a tiny bit closer. So let's look at the wrong side. Here's my wrong side, and I probably need to come in and do a tiny bit of clipping right there at that point to release it. Now sometimes all it is pressing, so I'm actually going to press first and make sure and see if it comes out. If it doesn't, then I need to probably clip about 1 stitch worth to release it, and then it'll be fine. All right, so here it is after pressing. I've just pinned to make sure I don't have any slippage under the machine. Here is how it's looking after a pressing. So I'm going to open it up and look underneath and see if I need to clip a little bit. But I can tell you this frays like a crazy, and I don't want that. So I'm going to look where it's pulling, and I may have to make just like a little clip here and there to release it. But we're also going to be cautious not to end up with any fraying, because you can end up with a hole in this facing. This type of facing is released, you end up with a hole. We don't want that. Let's top stitch. Just so you can kind of see how they plan for you to top stitch, they're actually going around the outer edge of the bias and around the entire placket, which makes sense, keeps your placket from flipping around. So I'm going to start in my center back. I'm going to be sewing at about 3/8 of an inch around until I get to the placket. I'm going to engage my even feed foot real quick. The bottom layer is more stable than the upper layer, and that even feed might help a little. Now the goal is to catch all of the layers. We want to catch our bias on the bottom and enclose all those raw edges and not get any pleats. Okay, so here's my placket. I can feel it right down here, so we're going to stitch towards that. Okay, I'm on the placket. I'm going to sink my needle.
flip this straight. And I'm just going to sew down, top stitching around this placket. Now, if it helps you, you can actually put a few little lines on here with some tailor's chalk or something to keep it straight. I'm sewing on the right side, not the wrong side. And it's easier to sew this with the wrong side up. It's also easier to get it crooked, and it'll really show from the right side. So I like to sew with the right side up. I'm flipping this. Kind of got a little tunnel here because I've got the back also attached. So just trying to keep everything flat and straight. And now we're ready to finish our circle around towards the center back where we started. And we're going to cross our old stitching. That's the same as back stitching. And we're done. When you're through, you want to flip it around and look at the back. Make sure you caught everything, that it looks good. You don't want any little holes, so we're going to always inspect where we just stitched. We're also going to make sure that this front placket looks nice and straight and even. And it does. I'm just making sure I don't have any little missed spots. Everything looks good. So here's our little neckline opening. Loving this soft fabric. So now that we've got that done, we have options. We can do our side seam and our hemming, or we can do sew our sleeve together and then come do our side seam, set in the sleeve, and then hem. Lots of options. I am going to go ahead and just get the sleeve prepped. This is a true set-in sleeve, and because of that, we should do a little basting line across the cap for ease, just in case it has a little extra wearing ease in there and we need to use a basting line to get it to go in nicely. So the other thing I'm going to do, I was trying to decide how I wanted to hem this. I think I'm just going to serge that hem. I've serged everything else. I'm going to just serge this hem, and we'll just do a turn and stitch hem. So let me serge these bottom edges real quick. There we go. All right, so now that we've done that, I'm going to set my machine to a basting stitch, and I'm going to, just in the cap, which is sort of above the two notches for the front and the back, I'm going to do a basting line, one at 5/8, and then it's best to do two, so you do like one at 5/8 and one at 1/4 or one at 3/8, something like that, and that's will help you ease in any fullness if you need to. Don't backstitch. This is just a basting line that we will be pulling out if we need to. Make sure you leave tails so that you can use them to pull in as needed. That's the one on 3/8, and now I'm going to come back, do it again at 5/8, just right beside it in the seam allowance. I'm keeping my sleeve flat and just making sure it doesn't pre-gather for me. We don't need that. So we've got our basting lines in the caps of both sleeves. I quickly went ahead and just serged the little underarm seam also, so that now that I'm ready to put the sleeve together, that seam is finished. So I'm going to just go do right sides together. I'm going to sew this little underarm seam at 5/8 of an inch and press them open. And I'm going to go ahead and put the hem in the sleeve. So the sleeve is completed and ready to be set in. Do not forget to put your machine back to regular stitch length. We were just basting a second ago. So we have one little sleeve, and now we're going to do this one. And then I'm going to press them open, press up the hem, and I'm just going to top stitch in the hem all the way around. I'm going to turn it up about 5/8 and just stitch in a short little hem. All right, so that's all done, ready to be pressed open and put the hem in. And I'm going to go ahead and sew my side seam while I'm sitting here so I can go do all the ironing at the same time. So we're going to put our right sides together on our side seam. Now remember, we have two different lengths here, and there's a marking, here's my marking, for how long, for where the slit starts. So I'm going to put a pin in that spot where the mark is, and another pin or two, and we're just going to sew 5/8 of an inch. Then this will be ready to be pressed open also, and we will be ready to head to the ironing board and do a bunch of ironing. The nice thing about, if you are working on this and you would like your slit a little higher or a little lower, that's such an easy thing to change before we put in our hems. So you can check that. I'm kind of long-waisted, so I always want to make sure that the slit at least goes past my waistline. I've had a few where the slit is so high that it's kind of up here in my waist, and don't need that. You can see I sort of streamline a little bit my sewing instead of going back and forth, back and forth. I do a lot of the same action at the same time so I can press all at the same time. It does shorten the sewing experience a little bit. It makes you make sure and get a good back stitch, because it will have a little pull in that area. So I'm going to do about 4 stitches instead of my regular 2. All right, let's go press everything open and hem our sleeve, and then we'll make a decision about what thing we want to do next. All right, I've pressed open my seams, I've pressed open my hem. I always start at the underarm, cross my seams, and I have hemmed one little sleeve. All right, I'm going to start pinning in my sleeve now that I've got cute sleeves put together. Start at the underarm. This is my shirt. This is my sleeve, so I line them up at the underarm, right sides together. And then I'm going to come around. Here is my notch. So, and I clip my notches, so I'm going to do notch to notch. Pin that in. And then the same in the back here. There's my 2 notches in the back. And I'm going to line them up. I love to do little clips like this because it's so accurate. Now that's all pinned in, and now we're ready to come up here. I have a little clip. This little clip is for the shoulder seam, so I can line up my shoulder seam. Now we can look and see if we have any ease that we need to take care of with our little gathering lines. And it looks like we do have some ease. Can you see the fullness there? So we're going to take both of these. I'm working on the wrong side of my garment. When I put in my basting lines, I always sew with the right side showing, so this is my bobbin side. And I'm going to gently pull these. We don't want gathers. We don't want gathers. Okay, so I'm gently pulling these little threads. We are not trying to get gathers, we're trying to move in the ease. And what's going to happen is you're probably going to pull a little more on the outer one than the inner one, just because we've got convex and concave curves happening here. And we're going to be pulling this in. You want to make this as even as possible. And then we're going to start pinning it out. So can you see now, when you look at it, see how the fullness is on this outer edge, but when you come to the seam line where it's going to be stitched, all that fullness is gone. And we're going to pin it in. When I go to sew this, I'm likely going to put the sleeve down and the shirt on top, and then that helps, the feed dogs can help with some of this ease in here. I'm pinning right on my 5/8 inch line with my heads hanging off the edge. And that's just going to help control this a little bit better. So now I have half the sleeve pinned in,
and all that ease, and then we're going to come around. This is the front of the sleeve. Now usually you have less ease in the front than you do in the back. So I'm going to pull my little lines again, always pulling from, for me, on the wrong side, which is where my bobbin was. It's just usually an easier pull, and it's if you kind of are consistent, it really helps too. And I've actually over gathered. We don't need that much gather. There's not that much ease in the front, so I'm going to pull some of that back out, and then I'll pin this down. And when I pin, I always make sure to pin these shoulder seams. Since I have them pressed open, I put extra pins up here to hold them down. Can move this one over, and that will help me keep from, when I'm crossing this, accidentally flipping that over. We don't want that. And now this sleeve is ready to go in. Okay, I've removed the tray table. You can see I'm sewing down in the well. I'm putting my, so I have a free arm to sew with. I'm starting at the underarm, 5/8 of an inch, and I'm being very careful to keep these cut edges on top of each other. After we get the sleeve sewn in, I'm going to come back and serge that edge, and I'm going to lose a little bit of seam allowance on purpose, because we don't want this whole 5/8 of an inch sticking up in our underarm when we're wearing it. So we're going to trim away some of this seam allowance. I'm also going to try it on real quick first, though, make sure I don't have any issues. Now I have the garment on top and the sleeve on the bottom. Which is why I pin with my heads out here like I do, because that helps so I can easily pull them out. And with the sleeve down, the feed dogs are helping with ease. I can also see this seam and make sure I don't accidentally flip it when stitching. I do like to sink my needle when working this. It just helps me keep from accidentally pulling something sideways. Okay, and we're back around where we started. And we have a sleeve in. We've got both sleeves in. Let's check our sleeves real quick, make sure we don't have any little foldovers or anything like that. I'm gonna just flip this around to the right side real quick. There we are. Okay, I'm gonna go slip this on real quick and double check that I like the fit through the neck and the shoulder. If everything's good, I'm just gonna serge around that armhole, and then we'll be ready to do hem, and it'll be done. Okay, we are down to the hem. Everything else is done. Sleeves are in, etc. And this is what we're working on. I'm going to do the deeper part of the hem first, and then come back and do this side seam, because it looks prettier when it flips open to have this part cover this part. So to have the little side cover the bottom. Let me show you how we're doing. So the front and the back are open. We have a slit here. This is where we've sewn to on our side seam. I am pressing up about 1/4 of an inch, and then I'm going to press up again 1 inch, and I'm just going to top stitch it. Then we're going to come back and fold this twice and top stitch this, and that will finish off the hem. So I'm going to go ahead and get this pressed twice. If it's easier for you, go ahead and press this up your 1/4 inch, stitch this first, then come back and do the 1 inch. I'm going to do that front and back, and just so you can see, I did it so that I have the longer tail in the back, so it's going to be offset like that. Alright, so I have the hems turned up. This is the deep hem along the bottom. I did do the double stitching where I stitched it down once, and I'm going to come back and stitch again, so it's a total of 1 1/4 inches. So here's the back side. You can see the double stitching. The stitch that's closer to the edge is the most recent one that I did. It is this one that will show. Whoop, come on. There we go. It's the one that shows right here. So that's the deep hem I've done for the top and the bottom. It's about 1 inch deep total, and you can see how soft and flowy it still is. Now let's do our little sides. Now that we have done this hem down here, we're gonna come in and do the little side slits, and all we're doing is rolling twice. So it's, because I serged all the way down, it makes it quite easy. We're gonna just tuck that under like that and stitch it. So you can see how I'm pinning. I'm gonna do that for both sides, and then I'll show you how I top stitch it on. I'm gonna get everything pinned in real quick. And I'm pinning so that my pins are where I can pull them out when I'm sewing from this side. See how they hang off the edge? Okay, I have got my hems turned under for the side slits. So they look like this. And I'm stitching at about 1/4 of an inch. I started at the bottom. The thing you want to make sure that everything stays tucked up. You don't want part of that hem hanging down on this side. And we're just stitching close and careful. Because this is so fine, I can actually see my little edge of my fabric. I'm following this little line right there on my machine so that I get a nice close edge, and that's what it looks like on the wrong side. Okay, so now that I'm on the other side, I'm going to stitch down just a couple stitches, sink my needle, turn, and now I'm ready to come down and finish my hem. Again, lining up with that line right there. And once we're done, we will double check that we didn't miss anything. That we didn't get a little place where it slipped. So let's check it. So right here you can see it slipped out. I'm going to unstitch this little part, fix that, and give everything a press, and we'll go try it on. Let's look at our top. It is definitely too sheer to wear without something underneath it. Even with flesh colored undergarments, it was very obvious change in color from bust line to waist to pant. So I have put on a green, just a tank top underneath it. I need to make a white one. So this is the top. Okay, I'm glad, obviously, everything about it, I'm having the deja vu thing in my head right now. I'm just thinking about that, but looks great, super simple, very fast sew. I like the shorter sleeve, especially in a soft summery fabric like this. Thanks for sewing with me. I'll see you next week for another fun day.